So let's start right away. Let's have our browser open. So what I've basically done is, from the last session where we talked about selectors, I've just cut a part of the index.html here, and I've taken them to, I've created another file about.html, and then I've opened them up here. So this is basically what I have, and from our notes will basically be we've done covered up to this point, and then we'll be taking off today from here, from CSS specificity. So let's start right away. Okay, basically what CSS specificity is this is how the browser decides which rule to apply. Let's say you have conflicting rules. I think let's use an illustration to, let's say in this, I think I really don't need much of this space. Let's say in this so I think I may be working with, okay, let's still continue with an external CSS. So let me test that this is working. Background green. So let's reload. Okay, that's linked. So let's I think we can open about that. So let's say we have these okay, let's start with this article tag. Let's give it an ID of, say, out, and then let's give it a class of desk, starts for description, and then maybe we can, I think that will be it. Let's use that for illustration. So basically what we are saying is, I have this article with an ID. It also has a description. Let's say I have a set of, I select this. There are, of course, with this there are several ways I can select that article. Let's say I come over here and I have article, and I set the background. Let me just pick background to, let me say, green, and then set the color to gray, that way. And okay, this will style this that color. Yes. Let's just return back to, so I've already given this article a style. Let's say I have I target this. I can also target this article this way, considering the fact that this article is inside a session. So I can say use the direct descendant, and then say section, and then give it a background of red. So let's check that out. So when I've targeted there, these are two ways I've targeted this. So what defines, so which rule will be applied? So you see that the red one is being applied. Let's try and switch put this one first. So, and then switch and then refresh. So you see that the red this one is being applied. So this is where specificity comes into play. It's a kind of ranking, or it defines a kind of ranking or preference or priority that is given to CSS rules that you specify in your style sheet. So what that basically does is that it allows you to define which rules will be applied, or the influence of a particular rule set on your documents. So let's look at how CSS can be checked. So you can see in my editor here is giving me a hint. So it says selector specificity is 1. So the ranking, let me comment out something to explain this. So normally you can select the attributes by ID. You can select it using the attribute selector. You can also select using class selector, and then you can also select by type, that's using the tag to select. So you can also select by specifying, although this is not encouraged, at important. So you can put that bang important. So basically there will be 4 spaces, 4 slots. Let's put it this way. These 4 slots, let me specify that here, 0 0 0 0. So these 4 slots is basically what by default this is basically what will be used to assign the rules. So the rank is from this to this. So for example, selecting by type, each type that you specify in a CSS rule takes a count. So this one from the left, if you look at this rank, this ranking, this is 0 0 0. So from the left, the 0, this position specifies the type is the position for the number of type selectors that you specify. That's the specifying rules by their tag name. So this is the number of type selectors that you specify in the rule. So this is the second one, moving from the left, is the number of attribute selectors or class selectors that you specify. So that's the second position. And then the third one, moving from the left, is the ID selector, and then the other one, although this is not encouraged, but I just want to show. So this one is where you specify the important rule. So let's briefly show this. So you can see that's why when you hover over this, it's telling you that the specificity is 1, because I've only specified one type selector. So if I add so if we look at this document, you see that this article also has an attribute, the ID selector. So if I add the ID, if I come over here and I say an article with an ID of, what's that ID self, an ID of about. So when I hover over it, you can see that it has slotted 1. So this is 101. So whatever rule 101 is bigger than here, the specificity is 2. So 101 is bigger than 2. So this is the rule that will be what applied, because it's saying that this rule, this targeting is more specific than this one. So targeting elements by their ID is more specific than targeting the element by their attribute, using attributes or classes. Is also more specific than targeting elements using just their tag name. So this is the how the specificity increases from the bottom to the what, to the top. So this is basically the case where you have in your document, you have a lot of items or markup you've already defined, and you are trying to override a particular rule, or maybe you are using some frameworks like Bootstrap and you are trying to apply your own rule and you see that your rule is not being applied. Is because the framework you are using is already applying some set of rules that are more specific to the ones that you have applied. So with this, let's say for example, with this you can be able to combine some description to increase the specificity. Let's say for example, I also say it has a class of text. So this is, I've defined, this is one has entered into this slot, and then by this another one has entered into this slot, and then by this another one has entered into the class slot. So when you look at it, you see 111, which is more specific than just specifying, assuming I just have, let's have another one here, and then take out, let's take out about. So for this one, the background is going to be blue. So you will see that this one, the specificity is 101 because we are having 1 as the type selector, which is putting on 1 here. So then here you are having 1 type selector, which is 1, and then a class, you are selecting by a class, which is the second one. So let me take out this, let me just take that out because it's not encouraged to use it, and as we are starting we don't need that. Sorry guys. So if for this one, so you can see that I have two of them. This is 1, 2 of them are type selectors, and they are, that's the count of it is 2, 1, 2. So that's why you have 2 there, and you can see this editor is doing a nice job telling you where the count is coming from. So when you hover over here, it's telling you that you are selecting by the article, the about, and these are the count of what you are selecting. So when we save and then we reload, you see that the one with no, so this background is still red. Am I missing anything? Background is green. Okay, let's reload. What's happening? Sorry, let's check this. Background color is red, and then background color is green, then the text, okay, let's check the, sorry, this class is description, not so that's why it's not finding any element with that class and it's applying that style. So this is desk, not text. So let's reload. So you see that this one is more specific so than that. So if you target elements by ID, you basically have 1, and then if you target by class or using the attributes, you have 0 there. You have 1 in this slot. So for now, let's say for example this one we are just targeting by ID. We have 1 in the ID slot, and then 0 in the attribute or class slot, and then 0 in the type slot. So basically we have 100, 100, So for this one, if you target by this, you have 0, 1, and then 0. So targeting this one gives 10. And then for this one, if you target by type, you have 1. So let's say for you to be able to use type and influence or override a selection made by class, that means you have to specify up to 10 which is ridiculous somehow. So you have to specify 10 types, so which is ridiculous. So this is like 10 times and this is 10 times, so like that. So if you target by specifying two types, let's say we have just like we have here, so this is going to be 2, and so on and so forth. So that's how we decide what is happening here. This rule is still not correct. So that's how we decide the rules that gets applied and the ones that don't. So that's it about CSS specificity. If you need more clarification, just do let me know. The next thing I want to talk about is sizing, box model, and all the rest of the stuff. So for this one, I will also be commenting that out. So let's have some space up here. So for this one, let's say I target this article. We can specify the size or that we want this to take, this article text here to take, using the width and the height. So I can define the width to be, let's say, 200 pixels. I can also define the height to be 250 pixels, just anything. Let's give it a background so that you can see what's happening there. Sorry, a background of green. Let's also return our color of white, and then when we save, so you can see that it's taking up that particular width. So this is width of 200 and height of 250. So this is how we can specify the size of an element or an item using the width and the height. Now let's talk about the unit specification a little bit. So I've specified using I've specified the size there using the width and the height. I can also come over here, and then there are several units that we can available to us. You have inches, the normal one, inches, centimeters, point, and all the rest of them, but I will only talk about a certain few, like the viewport width and viewport height, and then maybe talk about pixels, which we've already seen. Talk about EMs, and then so these are just the ones, they are the ones we'll basically be seeing more often than not. So pixels are like they are like fixed. So as I've defined this width to be 200 pixels, that means for every device, wherever we open this, you always see the width of this element being 200 pixels. So it's a kind of fixed way of defining size of an item. You can also define this item. Is usually not encouraged, particularly these days, that is more or less a requirement that your site is mobile responsive. So it's usually not encouraged. You can also specify your width using the size using percentages. So you can say let the width be 50%. Sorry, 50%, and then maybe the height. You can also say specify auto, so it will automatically set the height. So in this case, we are saying that the width is what? 50%. Now 50% of what? It will be 50% of the containing element. So for example, this article is contained in the section element, so it's going to be 50% of the width of section element. So if we save and reload, you can see that it's taking up 50% of that section. Let's try to color that section, so that let's give it a background. I'll just use this of red so that it's obvious where the section is. So you can see the width of the section, and this is only taking up 50% of the width. So if we set the width of this section to still be 50%, so when we reload, you can see that this section element is taking up 50%, just half of its own containing element, and then the article, which is 50%, is 50% of the containing element of the section. So it's now like 25% of where it would have occupied earlier. So this is 50% of the containing element. If the element is directly on inside the body tag, it will be 50% of whatever the width of the body is. So that's how we can specify. This is more this is basically what you mostly find with specification using a percentage. This makes it like, for example, if I adjust my screen to this, you can see that no matter the size of my device is always taking up 50%. So this is a kind of fluid way of specifying sorry guys, of specifying units. So next up is we can also specify units using the viewports. So the viewport, let me just take up this and comment that out. I can also specify width using the viewport. So in this case, I'm having the width. Let's put this one out. Okay, so I can also specify my width or my sizing based on the viewport. I can select the width be viewport width. So this is viewport with 50%. So this is going to be 50% of the viewport. The size is relative to the size of the viewport. So 50% of the viewport, that's what my article is. So when I do that, when I reload, you can see that my article, the size of my article is exceeding the size of the containing section, because in this case now I'm specifying the width relative to the viewport. So if the viewport goes wider, it's always going to maintain 50% of that, of whatever my viewport is. So it's a kind of relative to that. So if I make it, let's say 70% of that, so, and refresh, you can see it has taken up that 70% of the viewport. So I can also say viewport width. I can also say set the height to, let's say, 50% of the viewport height. That's also another specification that we can make. So let's see how that goes. So you can say it has taken up 50% of the viewport height. So whatever the height of the viewport is, it will take that up. So that's how we can specify using viewport width. We also have these Vmax and Vmin. So we have Vmax 70% of the maximum size of the viewport. So what this will check is, it will check the viewport, which one is larger. You can see that the viewports for example, the way my screen is, you can see that the height is larger. It will take 70% of the viewport, either width or height, whichever one that is bigger. So let's refresh. So we can see that this width is taking up 70%. So the width that I've specified here is taking up 70%. Let me set this to auto so that it's obvious what is changing. So when we refresh, you can see that this width is taking up 70% of this viewport. So if I set this to 70% of viewport mean, you can see that I'm in portrait. This is like more like portrait. So you can see that this is 70% of the viewport mean. So basically what this is doing is that if you look at my screen right now, you see that the height is larger than the width as it is now. So it will, since it is I've specified viewport mean, so the width is smaller, so it's going to calculate 70% of the viewport width and set my width to that. If I set this to viewport max, what this is going to do is that you can see that my height is larger than my width, so it's going to check 70% of my of the height of my viewport and then set that to the width of this. So this is how you can set, for example, background images to occupy the whole of your screen. So that's how we can set with that. We can also set using EMs, but this is kind of usually used for fonts. We'll come to that shortly, so where we talk about EM. So let's just keep that for now. So that's how we can set sizes and units. The next thing I want to talk about is if we look at the box model. So box model, this is actually very important, and we'll also be diving into some dev tools, so which is very useful. So let's still continue with our article. Let's target this article. It's kind of very handy. Let's continue with our basic style. We have background so that we can see what is going on. So okay, so the first thing I want to, we're actually running low on time, so I want to use this to introduce you to how the dev tool can help us to inspect our elements. So for example, I have this. You can look at the dev tools. You can right click. When you right click, you see this inspect, which is the shortcut is Ctrl+Shift+I. So when you click on it, the dev tool opens. You can also use the shortcut Ctrl+Shift+I, so it will open up the dev tools for you. So your own might be on the right. You can change the location where the dev tool is located. So from here, so what you just have to do is, you can see what I did. Why is my system slow? So you just these three dots here, you right click and then you can set it. You can see dock to the left, it will move to the left, to the right, and then to the bottom. So whichever one is you are comfortable with. So for me, I think it's just fine. So let's look at some of the dev tools. So if you look at this, you see the elements tab. Let me expand this a bit. So if you look at this, you will see the elements tab, and as I hover over the elements, so you can see is highlighting them in the thing. So I can look at this is the element. Then on this side, you can see these are the styles that are applied to it. So currently I'm selecting the body. You can also select specific element by selecting this, and then when you hover over any element it will show you. And then so I'm hovering over this about, so it's showing me the elements from this segment. So I hover over this, showing me, and there's also a little pop-up of the styles that are being applied. So this is a kind of very handy when we are working with CSS. So this is the elements tab. Also, you can also simulate various devices for their width. So you can select different width for how it will look. So this is how it will look on a mobile phone with width of 320 pixels. This is how it will look on, I think this is tablets. Okay, that's the width. You can also customize it. So just some things you can do here, but basically what I want us to look at is this style. So let's select the article. So this is the article. I've selected it, so you can see it's been highlighted here. So this is the style that is being applied. So currently you can see the background that I have set. So it's also showing you the style. This is the background I've set. This is coming from, it's telling you the source from style.css, which is the name of the file containing that style. As these two styles I've specified. So it's coming from, this is coming from style.css, which is an author CSS style, author style sheet. And then this article has a display set to block. We'll talk about this later. And this is coming from user agent style sheet, so is from the browser. Remember we talked about the sources of styles on the document. So these are also other styles. Now this is kind of very important and is key to understanding the box model. So this is basically what is defining the various attributes of the box model. So you can see various this is the content area, and then outside it we have the padding, and then we have the borders, and then we have the margin. So this is what makes up the box model that we are going to be talking about. So you can look at the computed values, how the values are being computed, and all the rest of them. So and is quite handy. And so from here I can also apply specific styles. So I can say I want the, let's say, the color. So any style I define here is going to be applied as an inline style. So you just watch over. This is the elements here, this is the elements here defined here. So when I define the color to be, let's say, red, so you can see that it has added an inline style. Remember we said that inlines will be given more preference than any other style that you define. So this style from my style sheet, style.css, is no longer valid, so it has given it an underline. What is now valid is the inline style that I've applied. So I can also define a background and set it to yellow. So this is the style that is being applied. Now this styling is not permanent, is just for the meantime. So if I come back to this later, if I close this, and so if I refresh, it goes back to the default. So it's not permanent, it's just for testing purposes, for you to check or test run. Let's say you have some specification and you want to know how it looks like. So you can come over here, element of style, and then specify the style that you want to be applied to it. So that's how the dev tools can help us in our CSS. So when we come back, we'll shut down here. When we come back in the next one, we'll be talking about the box model elements in particular. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to put down your questions in the comment section or in the platform, and give this video a thumbs up and subscribe. Thank you.